I hear a lot of people talking right now about all these things that are going to change after the lockdown, all these current practices that are going to be embedded and locked in and continue. And I find myself deeply skeptical about that. And I trained as an engineer, as you may be able to tell from my background, and really to put it in engineering terms, it feels to me like people are confusing plastic and elastic deformation. You know, elastic deformations, you bend something and it snaps back again to where it was before. Whereas a plastic deformation, you bend it and it stays in the position it was in. And right now it feels like we're going through an elastic deformation and people are confusing it with a plastic deformation. Lots of things we've changed under duress, under pressure, are going to remain. I wanted to talk a little bit about why, why I think that is, and some of the critical things I think are going to force us to snap back, with a particular focus on the future of work. But I think this is a much more widespread trend. Just first, I wanted to qualify my negativity, and I often get told off for this. People often confuse the things that futurists talk about, the things that they see, with what the futurists want to see. And while I may be interested in campaigning for the future I want to see in my personal life, professionally, I find it's much more my job, by and large, to tell people what I see happening so they can do something about it, rather than being the person who tells them what I think should happen. So where does this come from? Where does this idea come from that actually things are going to be completely different post-lockdown, that the world's going to be completely different, particularly, as I say, in this microcosm of the world of work? We've seen lots of announcements over the last week or so from the likes of Microsoft, the likes of Twitter, the likes of Square, Facebook, who've said, actually, do you know what? Working from home, remote working is going to be the new norm. And lots of people have celebrated this, said that this is this is evidence of what the new norm is going to be from everybody. And I find myself being deeply skeptical about this. I mean, you only have to look at the nature of the salaries that people in these companies are typically working to, the challenges that these companies face right now in terms of recruiting people into their primary headquarters, where property is so expensive. They need to find a more distributed workforce, and recognize that actually these Silicon Valley and US companies, high-tech companies, are an unusual example of an organization that's perhaps well equipped to shift things to a different way of working. And I'm going to talk through 3 other things I think maybe they've got, the thing that other companies don't have, other companies aren't prepared to do, and reasons actually why I think we're not going to see a massive plastic shift in the nature of work after the lockdown, but rather a more sort of a snap back, just as we're starting to see a snap back in terms of people's retail behavior, people's leisure behavior, even before the lockdown has technically ended. And the first reason I think that this current shift we've been through doesn't embed, doesn't stick, is actually that a lot of people don't want to work remotely. I think lots of us who do, who've been doing it for a long time, perhaps those of us from the tech industry, those of us who are at a certain stage in our careers where we have the confidence and the wealth and the big enough home to be able to work from home comfortably, mistake this sort of the panacea. We see it as a panacea for everybody. And that's fine until you go and talk to somebody who doesn't have the space at home, who's living in a 1-bedroom flat or a studio, and for whom actually getting out to the office is a really big chance, big opportunity, a big shift in their lives, a change in their, that breaks up their working life and gives them space and an opportunity to go and do other things. It feels it's fantastic working from home until you can't get away from the kids and you don't have a partner who can take the kids away from you for a good period so you can get on with what you want to do. And particularly we know from some of the stats over the last week that women, full-time working women, even during lockdown, have been taking on the lion's share of the parenting, even when their co-parent sometimes isn't working at all. And so particularly for women, actually working from home can be more challenging if they don't have a partner who's taking on their fair share and taking people away from them. It's difficult if you've got a difficult home environment, if either you're living in an abusive relationship and an abusive family maybe doesn't understand you, respecting your life choices or your identity. For all those reasons, actually working from home can be difficult. And actually more sort of commonly I found, and I did some very unscientific research about this, lots of people just like the office environment. They like the camaraderie. They're not necessarily a self-starter who's confident getting up and motivating themselves. They need that input from the other people around the office, whether it's their boss or their peers, to actually drive them in to getting things done. And finally, is the aspect of just being a junior person. Like, how do you get to grips with working from home if you're not surrounded by people who can teach you, coach you, manage you, keep a sort of weather eye on your mental health, your performance, and give you the support you need at the start of your career? The second thing I've noticed, and again, this comes out from a lot of my work, I go in and do sort of quite deep dive consultancy work with clients sometimes. And what you find is actually that the way that we manage companies, and this is particularly a UK disease, I think, we're highly dependent on people's presence and visible effort in terms of managing them, rather than looking in any depth or detail at their outputs and what they're delivering. And we're very bad at packaging work appropriately and giving them a chance to actually look at their expectations, see what they're going to deliver, and focusing on that. And we're just not trained in terms of our middle management for looking after people in remote management. They also feel that they can't fulfill their duty of pastoral care to their employees, particularly those junior ones I talked about before. And they're used to measuring effort, not output. We don't package work in an appropriate way that allows us to measure output, not effort. And this brings me to the third reason I think that actually this whole flexible working revolution will not come about, and we will see this snapback, is that we don't have this culture of autonomy and responsibility in most of our organizations. We don't give people the trust, the skills, the support, the rules, the boundaries, if you like, and the training to allow them to take a package of work and go off and deliver it solo. And before you can make flexible working work really, really effectively, before you can get the maximum productivity out of it, you need to have that culture in place. You need to have got away from presenteeism. There was a fantastic article on DigiDay this week about the new presenteeism, where people are being expected to be on Slack at all times of day and night to show that they're working hard. We need to accept that people shouldn't be working 8 hours a day, 9 to 5 at their desks at home, but they should be delivering what we expect of them, an appropriate level of expectation. And you know what? If they do that by spending 8 hours a day watching Netflix in their pants and then working very hard for 2 hours at night, so be it. That should be their prerogative, as long as they're delivering on our expectations. So yeah, that's for me 3 things that are really going to stop this flexible working revolution coming about. First one, lots of people don't want to work from home or can't work from home successfully. Secondly, lots of managers aren't equipped, trained, prepared to actually manage people remotely. We don't have the systems in place. And thirdly, we just don't have the culture of autonomy and responsibility where we push power to the edge of the organization and let people get on with their job inside a well-defined package of work. Steve.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. You've put your slide up there for questions. What we'll do is we'll have a combined Q&A session after we've heard from Roberto as well. Just a reminder, if you have got a question for either Tom or Roberto, then please do put the questions in the Q&A tab, and we'll look at those once we've heard from Roberto and put your questions to our 2 speakers. So I'm delighted now to welcome Roberto to the stage. Roberto's chapter is entitled The Rise of Personal Digital Twins. Roberto is a volunteer at IEEE and currently co-chairs the Digital Reality Initiative. So Roberto, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Steve, and buongiorno to everybody. I'm based in Italy. Okay, well, you might have noticed that in the last decades, we have been more and more converting atoms into bits. And of course, this has started in the industrial environment. We started with using computer for a specification of what we are planning to do. And then for the design phase, we use those models developed in the computer for simulation. And once we were sure that that was exactly what we were aiming at, then we were using computers, we call them CAM, computer-aided manufacturing, to create the product. Over the last few years, perhaps 10 years, we have started to embed sensors in these products. We call this IoT, Internet of Things. And basically, this is providing a sort of feedback, allowing the manufacturer or some service provider to monitor what is going on in that product. So we have this kind of sensors in airplane engines. We do have these in several cars, more and more cars, and so on. Well, actually, we have been calling this modeling and monitoring of things with one concept, digital twin. So digital twin basically is something that is mirroring, modeling an object, a process, an entity. It's something that can shadow these, the working, the operation of this product. And it's also something that can keep a thread of what is going on, the history, the record of this program, of this product. Now, all of these works pretty well and it's quite widespread. Now, companies and researchers started to think about, hey, if we can model a machine, couldn't we also use the same approach to model ourselves as a person as machine to be modeled? And as a matter of fact, it was quite easy to start modeling the machine and creating digital twin of machine because we had all this data about machines. But we are starting to have data about ourselves as well. We do have data, healthcare data as an example. They are digitalized, most of them. When we take an exam, this exam is converted into bits. When we have a prescription, the prescription is usually written in digital form, and we can have a record, our healthcare record, in a digital form. More than that, we have started to wear wearables like watches, like bands that can monitor our physiological state, like the heartbeat, like the breathing, like the kind of activity that we are doing, taking through the day. We are having sensor more and more for oximetry that are measuring the oxygen level in our blood. And we do have accelerator on ourselves in our smartphone as an example. Now, why is an accelerator important? Well, it's important because if you have something that is sensing your heartbeat and it signals that your heartbeat goes on and keeps increasing, but at the same time, you've got an accelerator that is saying, hey, this guy is running, so well, that's okay? But if you are just sitting on a couch and your heart starts to beat faster and faster, that's not good. So all this means that we can analyze this data, we can perform data analytics of our data to monitor ourselves, our physical state, and understand more and more what is going on. Now, companies like Philips, like General Electric, like Nokia, have started to consider this kind of data and the possibility of performing data analytics in real time as the opening gate for creating personal digital twin. A personal digital twin is a mirror of myself. It's also a shadow of myself because it receives continuously data from various sensors about what I'm doing, about my physiological status. Now, we've got plenty of sensors in the smartphones. And one very common sensor is the microphone. How much time you're using the microphone in your smartphone? Well, during the day, you're talking, you're making calls, and there are apps today that can analyze your voice. And what is more important is the fact that they can analyze the difference in pattern of your voice. They can detect changing in moods. They can detect some harshness in your voice. And all of these, because it creates a thread, can be analyzed and can work out whether you are feeling well or not. And what is amazing is most of the time, it can actually detect if you're going to feel worse before you're actually feeling worse. So the first role of a personal digital twin is about intercepting whether your physical state, your health status is changing, to provide you an awareness about this kind of thing. But of course, the digital twin is living in a context in the cyberspace together with many other digital twins. And it can share this kind of information in a completely neutral way without saying, I'm the digital twin of this particular person, okay? But it's sharing some of this information. And it's also receiving part of this information from other digital twins. And it's also receiving information from the healthcare institution. And some of this information might be about, hey, you're living in an environment where there's an outbreak of a certain epidemic. And the signs of being affected by this epidemic, by this virus, is because you start feeling tired, your heart is pumping less, you got higher blood pressure, or you're coughing, or whatever, okay? So actually, by comparing all this data, your personal digital twin can raise a flag, a red flag to you and say, hey, be careful, okay? I've got sensation that you might have something, okay? So why don't we double check, making some precise test? It can also report these changing healthcare status to the community of digital twins that are living around you. So at the community level, you can start to make data analytics of what is changing. And more than that, if somebody is actually testing positive to that particular virus, in our case to COVID-19, then you can really raise a flag, okay? And do this kind of automatic tracing because you have all this thread of digital twins, what they've been doing and so on. Now, what is nice and what makes the difference between a digital twin and an app, because we're talking today about apps for tracing, okay, our vicinity to our people that might have been infected, is the fact that the personal digital twin is actually decoupling your personal physical twin, yourself, your body, with the data in the cyberspace. And you know that the sort of segment where you are in between, and on one side you perceive the privacy, and on the other side the societal benefits. And the digital twin can create a buffer. It's not a single dividing line, it's a buffer. And why it's a buffer and not a dividing line? Well, because the dividing line is something that you're either here or there. But actually, with the personal digital twin, you can create a context, such as if I'm feeling perfectly well and there are no signs that I might be infected, there's no reason to disclose my data. But if I start coughing, if I start having a temperature or something like that, then there might be a risk that I have been infected, particularly if I have been in contact with somebody else and so on. So the digital twin can expand this dividing line between privacy and societal benefit and start communicate some data to make the context aware that I might have run into this kind of thing. So my vision is that in this decade, we are going to have many, many more of us personal digital twins. And this personal digital twin living in the cyberspace can communicate one another and can protect us, make us more aware, and create this societal benefit of understanding what is going on. Steve, back to you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Roberto. But let me bring Tom back in as well. There, we should all be back, I hope. Oh, no, we're not. Bear
yes,
with me.
I saw him, and I saw you.
Yeah, I'm here, I think.
Cool. Okay.
Have we now lost Steve?
Yeah. I can see you.
There?
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay, I'm going to be Steve for a while. So let's start with a polling question that we've got for around you guys, and then we'll take a. So let's get this polling question launched, and while people are answering that, let's take some of the questions. But actually, I'm going to start with you, Tom. I've got one for you. So your argument around us not pursuing the snapback is very much around the person, the individual, the cultural drivers of why I might want to go back into the workplace. And I completely buy that. A friend of mine, strategy director at Bangalore Airport, said, you know, his team have basically just levitated back to the office because they're fed up of looking at the screen all day. And they just want to be able to talk to each other over a desk, you know, socially distanced or whatever. They just want that. And Steve is back, so he's going to carry on. But my question is this going to be taken out of the hands of individuals because businesses are just going to say, we want less office space, we're planning for 1/3 of what we had, and at least for the next couple of years, while they're trying to make up for lost ground and lost revenues and, you know, all the rest of it, is this just going to be something that ends up being imposed on the workforce, whatever we want?
I think this also answers one of the questions in the Q&A, and it speaks to something that one of the earlier speakers said. You know, what we've seen through this crisis is not necessarily new trends, but the acceleration of existing trends and behaviours. And I think what we're seeing here is, you know, sure, we were already going in the direction of more, you know, fewer offices, more flexible workspace, more flexible working, more remote working, or connected working, which I the phrase I probably prefer most. That was already happening. You know, what this crisis has done and has demonstrated to lots of people who may have been skeptics that actually the technology works fundamentally. You know, even if you didn't believe it before, it's pretty obvious now that technology works. It's been working for a decade or more, but that bit's out of the way. You've got no excuse now. So do you know what? You can do it remotely. You can bring down the number of office spaces, bring down the size of the office, bring down the number of desks, bring down the number of parking spaces, and do things differently. But that doesn't mean it's going to be a revolution. I think we'll see what we had before, you know, at an accelerated rate, plus or minus 5%. Are more people going to work from home and work remotely? Absolutely. But it's not going to be this dramatic revolution for all the reasons I outlined.
So sorry about that, but I'm going to blame the technology, but hopefully I'm back and you can hear me okay now. So if we look at the poll results, how do you see the use of workplace technology evolving in the next 2 to 3 years? Then there's a clear winner there, which is increasing numbers working from home. So Tom, the delegates seem to slightly disagree with you.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, I think will increasing numbers work from home? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, you know, lots of people, lots of companies have been working from home over this period. And, you know, they can't, I know this, lots of people can't wait for it to end. Both the workers who are working from home in difficult situations or who miss the office, but particularly that class of middle managers who are like, look, I was never equipped for this. I wasn't trained for this. And just because we've put Zoom in place for everybody and we've suddenly got a corporate Zoom account, doesn't mean I have the processes in place to brief work and manage work out from people. And that's a particularly big challenge. It doesn't mean that my staff are suddenly equipped to work remotely. And you've got these middle managers sort of chewing their fingernails off, going, look, I just don't know what's happening when these people are remote. And the knock-on effect is they're driving bad behaviors because they're nervous about it. You know, they're asking people, they're pinging people Slack messages at all times of day and night. You know, they're putting in these ridiculous number of scheduled video calls just to check things are actually happening because they don't have the mechanisms in place to do it without that. And because of that, you know, lots of people's experience of remote working is going to be really bad. And until you fix that culture piece, what you end up doing is going, you know, straight down the remote working piece and then snapping back again. You know, again, we're going to have almost like a second wave, if you like, because actually the experiment failed because you've not done the important, difficult piece of changing the culture.
The other thing I noticed, and this is particularly for Roberto, is, you know, there doesn't seem to be too much support across the people on the webinar this afternoon, thinking about the widespread adoption of digital twins, and I think linked to that potentially is the idea that actually it kind of fosters a bit of a surveillance society. So what do you say to that? What will change the mindset of people to be more accepting of digital twins and the inevitable sharing of personal information that comes along with that?
Well, Steve, first of all, I think there's a misunderstanding in many people because we already have digital twins. Wherever you're watching Netflix is watching you, okay? So they are profiling you. And just for fun, I started in the last few days to try to understand how many out there are profiling me and how much of my data is out there, okay? And I was just flabbergasted of the number of information that is being harvested about myself. So we are already in that stage. The personal digital twin is actually an attempt to draw a line between my data and those out there that are using my data. I want to keep control of my data. The idea of personal digital twin is that my data stays with me, okay? Now, think about just for a completely regular thing. You're living in the UK, so probably you're living in heaven, I don't know. But in Italy, when I have to talk to one government agency, I have to register on that government agency, and they have all my data. And then I go to another one, and I have to re-register on the other one, and they have all my data. And this goes over and over and over again. Why shouldn't I be able just to be myself, okay? And just by presenting myself, I am identified, okay? And only at that moment I can share my data with this kind of organization. So the personal digital twin is actually an attempt to regain the privacy space and share on a need to know basis, not share just in case.
If I can jump in there, Steve, in defense of the digital twin, I'm a huge fan of this concept. I tend to talk about it as the personal digital assistant. I think part of the reason why people might not have voted for it in the poll is that actually 2 to 3 years feels really close. Like right now, so much of our data, as Roberto says, exists in the hands of third parties. It's distributed around the web. There's very little mechanism for pulling it all together and changing that ownership relationship so that we can aggregate it and use it on our behalf. But I think Roberto's absolutely right. We end up going down that route because of one fundamental human characteristic, which is that we hate friction. We hate unnecessary effort. And by aggregating that data, if I can, even really noddy things, as Roberto says, aggregating my government data in one place so that I only have to fill it in once or never at all because it's just captured. But really even consumer level things, I'd love some crossover between my Netflix and my Spotify playlist, what they know about me, because I bet they could make better recommendations if they had those two data sets pulled together inside my sort of personal data firewall rather than it sitting with them.
Mm. Cool, thank you.
Exactly.
Let me just go to one or two of the questions that have been posted. Alistair Jones has asked about, I suppose, the plasticity within the snapback. So, what are the kind of things that would vary that? Do you think, Tom, particularly? I'm asking here. What is it that might change the degree by which people will either go back to the office or stay remote working? I think you started to touch on that on some of your presentation, but what are the other things that you think are important there?
Well, one of the things is going to be one of those very plastic effects of the lockdown, which is, lots of people's jobs aren't going to be there when we go back. Lots of the organisation that employs them aren't going to be there when they go back. And so the nature of the work that they go back into may well be very different. We know that on both sides of the Atlantic, the fastest growing class of employment is self-employment, whether that is in relatively low paid and high insecurity jobs in the gig economy, or whether it's actually quite, relatively well paid freelance consulting creative jobs. And I think lots of people now, particularly if they've lost their jobs in this crisis, are going to find themselves, going into a very uncertain work environment that quite possibly will see them working from home, working remotely, in a much more flexible fashion, including the flexibility of their employment. And that's going to be a really interesting challenge for us as we go forward, because I don't think government's really set up to manage that ongoing large-scale shift to self-employment. And the loss of the social contract so many of us used to have with our employers as a result. The government's we're not really, certainly in the UK, and I'd certainly say in the US as well, we may be better placed in certain parts of Europe, but we don't really have governments who are disposed to increasing the size of the welfare state to give us the security we're losing from long-term employment. So that's been an interesting point of tension over the next 5-10 years.
Roberto, you've spoken quite a lot about digital twins in the context of health, but how else do you see digital twins starting to become more commonly used over the near-term future? Because quite often, and someone, I can't remember which of you spoke about the ability to use some of these technologies as surveillance tools for a remote workforce. But so what other types of application do you see in the future?
Well, for personal digital twin, I think that the one important application will be in the space of education. I've been talking with people at SAP as an example. SAP is a very big company, and they are managing or offering tools to manage resources at the enterprise level. Now, one of these resources is the knowledge of their employee. And it's very, very difficult today to grasp what kind of knowledge is disseminated in an enterprise and what kind of knowledge is available out there. We actually have so much knowledge that it's so difficult to keep track of how it is evolving. And the gap is expanding. So any company that wants to fill this gap is actually going either for training, but that's too costly, or trying to hire people with the right knowledge, or more and more, they will be hiring machines that can share this kind of knowledge, robots and software, nobots, and so on, these kind of things. Now, so this is happening. At the IEEE, we are developing a big initiative that is called Knowledge as a Service. And this is based on the idea that our members will develop a personal digital twin of their knowledge space. And this is something that goes beyond just profiling, okay? Today, you're already profiling to say, I'm interested in these kind of things, okay? With the kind of personal knowledge digital twin, what you do is actually, now I'm following this course, now I'm attending this conference, now I'm working on this project. And so all this information goes into your knowledge space, and you grow your knowledge space. And then the important thing is to understand what is the knowledge gap. And the knowledge gap is not an absolute gap between your knowledge and the knowledge out there, but the knowledge that you need in order to be competitive for a certain application, for a certain task. So what we're aiming at is trying to identify this knowledge gap. And for this, we need to follow the trend of the personal digital twin, cognitive digital twin. IBM is another company that is actually investing on cognitive digital twins.
Right. So it's an interesting question that I think begins to overlap there that Fabian has asked, which is, how will the workplace evolve in the future to fit new safety measures, new working from home behaviors, and new team management styles? So how does what we're talking about manifest itself in those kind of ways?
I mean, you're going to see some really simple stuff in the physical workplace in the very near future. I got contacted by a company that they're doing cardboard screens for cubicles to limit the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. So you're going to see some very simple, quick physical changes. But the really big one is about how we manage people. You know, and right now, the last 50 years of management theory has been very much about optimization. Like, how do we do tomorrow what we did yesterday, but slightly better, where better typically means more efficiently. And that's led us to a particular set of management behaviors where it's actually have quite low overheads in terms of how we manage. We basically train people up to do something. We keep an eye on them to make sure they're doing it. And we kind of manage by exception. If we're all in the workplace together, we can keep an eye on them. We can see what their output is. We can see if they're sweating, if their hands are flying over the keyboard. And as long as it looks like they're working, we're seeing results. We don't actually get involved too much in terms of exactly how they're working. We don't put in those sort of management practices. Whereas if you look at how a lot of the Silicon Valley companies work in terms of the way they build software, they have much higher overheads in terms of their management. So they actually take every piece of work, they break it down, they say, right, this is what we're going to expect of you. Here's our hypothesis about how long it's going to take and how you're going to tackle it. We'll agree this together with you before you go off and tackle this. And we'll lay out a plan of work, right, go off and tackle it. When you come back, right, we'll review it. Was our hypothesis correct? How did you do against it? Was the approach we thought you were going to take right? Let's take that learning and capture it into this sort of knowledge environment that Roberto's talking about, so that next time we brief something that looks like this, we can do it in a better fashion. And so the overhead in what they're doing is much, much higher. But the result is that everybody can operate with more autonomy and flexibility. You can extract greater productivity out of people. There's less wastage. People actually work fewer hours, actually, if you do it right, even though it feels quite labor intensive. And I think we're shifting from this ethos of everything must be as optimized as possible and as efficient as possible to an ethos of everything's got to be really flexible. And again, one of your previous speakers spoke to, we're in this age where we're shifting from an age of optimization to an age of adaptation. The big change in our working behaviors, and particularly when lots of people working from home, is we've got to build our briefing management frameworks to allow that maximum adaptability and give people the freedom and autonomy to do that.
It sounds like there's a lot of kind of leadership training around managing people in that way that's required. Roberto, what's your sense?
What is?
What's your sense of the kind of the social and the management issues that both the use of the technologies and the way that we manifest that use in the workplace? How do you see that evolving?
I do agree with what it was said. I also am not seeing that we are going to have a revolution in the sense that, okay, we're all staying home because we have seen that one way or another it works. Actually, what we have seen lately is that by experimenting all these tools is how poorly they are working, okay, in a way. So people want to go back to work because these tools are not exactly the real thing. So I see that there's a sense of opportunity for those companies that are providing these cooperative tools to improve. I've seen companies like Spatial or other that are trying now to move into the augmented reality and virtual reality to see whether they can be more effective. I still see some 2-3 years at least before these kind of tools can become mass marketable in a way. So we see. I just attended last week the virtual conference, the AWE conference, and they experimented with a number of virtual cooperation tools there. But you see the potential, but they are not real right now. So what I see is that actually many people will go back to work. I also see that many companies have understood that, yes, we can work from remote, we can save money, office space and so on. So there will be a higher pressure from companies also to delocalize work. I see a trend or a threat in the sense that by working from remote, you are much more traceable than working on site in a way. Okay, so this is a matter of life. So these all these kind of threats will create a new fabric of work. So I concur with the fact that we are going back to the office because we want to go back, because working from home in some cases is not that efficient. So we want to go back. We want to meet the clients face to face because you can see the subtle messages that they're sending you, something you're not perceiving through the screen. But at the same time, we have learned that yes, it's possible to do quite a bit from remote, okay? And that is to the advantage of the worker and to the company. We need better tools, and we are going to see more investment on the tools. So we are going to get better tools in 2-3 years' time.
So I think we might have started covering some of the next question I was going to ask. And Sheila Moorcroft has posted a question. She asks, we're already moving to a world of radical transparency, which goes both ways, i.e. we can know more about companies and they about us. But what needs to happen to build trust after the abuses of data that tech companies and others have shown?
Yeah.
Well, if I may start and then, okay, I just start and then I leave you the floor.
Sure, please.
My take is that, my take basically is that is not as much as trust, okay? It takes a lot of time to gain trust and you lose it in just a second. It's more a path of showing benefits and showing services. If I can show that actually the use of data or the use of interaction with you can really deliver worth services to you and can really benefit you, and I can show you that there's a benefit for the society in some cases, then probably people are more than willing to go along with this kind of thing, okay? In Italy, we have a very strong reaction against this app for tracing people, and that came from the government, basically. This is the kind of reaction from some focus group. And then there was a poll asking people, what do you feel about it? And 67% of people said, if this is helping to end it all, let's make it, let's have it, I don't care. So it's about benefit, I think.
But and people do see the benefits. You know, you ask people whether they trust Facebook or Twitter with their data, and they tell you no. You ask them whether they've stopped using those applications, and they say no, they're still using them. And why? Because they see exactly that value exchange that Roberto's talking about. They feel the value of giving up their data. So while people are very skeptical about these companies, they say very vocally that they don't trust them. The vast majority of people will still use it if the benefit's there. I'd like people to be a bit more skeptical, frankly.
Well, Roberto, Tom, we've come to the end of the session, so I'd really like to thank you for your input, both your presentations and responding to the questions. Apologies again for my technology hiccup earlier on, but once again, thank you very much indeed for taking part. We're going to go into another break now, and we will be back at 6 p.m. UK time, so that's 20 minutes from now. Once again, we won't be closing the webinar down so that we're minimizing that's my phone doing silly things. So we're minimizing the need for people to actually log back in. So we'll see you back here in 20 minutes. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.